And the reason is because I'm a native New Mexican and grew up in an area that was predominantly Hispanic. And as a community, we were all expected and tutored as a neighborhood, not as African American, not as Hispanic, not as Native American, not as white, not as anything other than a community. And this concerns me. I wasn't here when we passed the Office of African American Affairs, and I probably would have stood up in opposition of that as well, because there's so many of us that were raised in a community where every parent expected us to do well. I caught just as much flack for a D on my report card from Joe and Jesse Rodriguez as I did from Mabel and Jewel Powdrell, and as I did from Mr. and Mrs. Valerio, because we had a community that cared about us. We had a community that took pride in all the kids in the community, no matter what their ethnicity was. And so it concerns me that we're spending our dimes and our dollars on addressing these types of issues from this perspective. I think it's very important that, first of all, the PED does the job that it is supposed to do, and that is to educate our children. And that the schools in our communities start allowing parents to come back in and be involved in the schools, inviting them to come back in and be involved in the schools. For me, it's not an issue of ethnicity. It's when sitting here these past couple of years and listening to these discussions, it's almost like we're regressing back to the 60s, when there were all these divisions. We spent all this time and money to move forward just to go backwards. Last week, I had my nephew Jeremy up here. And it was funny because Jeremy is biracial. Jeremy is half black and half Spanish. And I asked Jeremy, I was combing his hair and I was talking about his biracial mix. He asked me, what did that mean? Jeremy speaks very fluent Spanish. And I wish I would have thought about it, because I would have had him to sing to say the Pledge of Allegiance and sing the national anthem in Spanish. So I think it really is unfortunate that we are having to address these issues, because honestly, I don't think it's about being Hispanic, being African American. And so I'm just concerned that we are spending our time and our dollars on doing something like this. I think PED needs to start back working with communities and inviting these communities to come in and work with the teachers. It seems that we've put a ton of time and money into bilingual education in the schools. Let's use some of these people to communicate with the parents who can't speak Spanish. But most of all, let's have parents be accountable for these children or these kids, these babies that they bring into the world. And it's very important to me, it's very important that all of my little nieces and nephews know that this world is a community. It's not a black world, though we have our issues. It's not a Native American world, though they have their issues. Certainly the Hispanic community has its issues. The white community has its issues. We all have our issues, but we're all Americans first. And I think it's just so important that we stop reinstalling, for lack of a better word, all these boundaries. Because what I think that we're doing, a whole new generation of racism.